Welcome friends. This is a web novel. Imagination is key to enjoy it fully. Please like, subscribe and gives your feedback.
In front of me stood three tall people who had most of their faces covered by their dark, ominous hoods. One was holding a large, crudely made, machete-like blade, another was holding a long silver spear, and the final one was holding what appeared to be a plain walking stick. Just in the few milliseconds of observation, the person holding the plain stick worried me the most. For someone to be using such a poor weapon, they must have some sort of combat-related system to back it up. With practically no information at hand, I could not afford to allow them to get any attacks off on me. I made sure to keep all three of them view as I raised manhwarecap for my first attack. I swung down straight towards the stick wielder and he held up his stick to block my attack. It was extremely sturdy as I couldn't cut it even with my demonic weapon. There was definitely something up with his weapon. I jumped back and regained my posture as fast as I could. I was given no opening to attack as the other two started flooding me with a flurry of attacks. I blocked with my sword and the sound of metal clattering filled the area as our weapons smashed into each other. I carefully watched their relatively predictable attacks and blocked them accordingly. They continued pounding down at me with their sharp metal weapons as I was forced back into a defensive position. I didn't want to use any more of Mayuri's strength until I fought a stronger opponent. For a few seconds, I continuously deflected their attacks until I noticed the stick user conjuring a sword behind him. A long silver sword was summoned, floating above his shoulder like a magical pet. A thick blue aura gathered around the sword as he appeared to be controlling it with telekinesis. I wanted to focus all of my attention on it, but I was still frantically defending against the other two attackers who were constantly pounding me with swings and slashes. I needed distance. I quickly took a few steps back whilst blocking their attacks with my demonic sword. I kept an eye on the cloak in the background as he controlled a floating sword freely in the air. Why did he need a stick though? If that was his ability, what was the stick for? Until I managed to figure that out, I would be fighting an uphill battle. Looking at the two cloaks in front of me, I assumed they were resource or utility types since they didn't appear to be using any offensive abilities. This meant that the only real dangerous one was the other. I looked around and noticed that both Rook and Bishop were tied up in their own separate battles. There were way more cloaks than I previously saw. From a brief glance, I counted at least 8 just nearby. I still didn't know how many Chloe was facing. I tensed my body and tried to get on the offensive against the two in front of me. Currently, they were just berating me with no repercussions. I managed to get a good deflection, causing one of them to fall off balance. In the opening, I swung manhwarecap, slicing straight into his chest. Ow! Why did I just feel a sharp pain in my left arm? I looked down. Crap! The floating blade that the other cloak was controlling. It was in my arm. Fuck. I jumped back quickly as I figured out what was going on. I must have missed where it was while I was too preoccupied fighting the other two. The blade pulled itself out of my arm and floated back into the sky. I looked as my arm was stained with a deep red. Damn it. Luckily, it perfectly cut me where the bandage was. The bandage was relatively effective in minimizing the damage and I could feel the opening slowly healing. I needed to be careful though. I was lucky this time, but if it goes into my chest or my head, I'm dead. Wait. If he could have stabbed me in the head or in the chest, why did he stab me in the arm? Surely he didn't just miss, right? I looked over as I saw him doing something with the stick. Damn, I didn't have time to identify what he was doing. Without any time to spare, I was once again forced into a long dragged-out fight. The one I managed to cut was on the ground holding his chest in pain. However, the other one was still vigorously fighting me. It was much easier to fight one opponent at a time, however. I watched as his machete swung around me. Every time, I had a split second to position my blade in order to block it. Every single hit was a close call. The heavy weight of the machete felt as if a boulder was crashing into me with every single strike. I sustained several cuts around my body just from the machete bouncing around my skin like a dolphin. The loud banging of our two blades smashing into each other completely filled my ears. I could no longer hear anything else that was going on. In the gray and purple blur of our weapons clashing with each other, I tried to catch a glimpse of the cloak that was controlling the floating sword. I still had no idea of the conditions required to use it, but based on the previous attack, there seemed to be something stopping it from instantly killing me. I managed to block several of the cloak strikes from in front of me, and with my much lighter blade, I was able to counter and stab them. They quickly moved their body, causing my blade to cut directly into their shoulder instead of their neck. I ripped out my blade and took a few steps back as they shouted in pain. Suddenly, in the brief opening, I managed to see the floating sword traveling towards me. However, in the corner of my eye, I managed to see its controller. The cloak was drawing on his leg with the stick. Suddenly, I realized the condition required to control the floating sword. Controlling the sword wasn't as simple as merely guiding it to my neck with one's mind. It appeared that the method of control was quite crude, requiring him to have to draw the path on his leg in some way in order to move it towards me. The two cloaks who were previously fighting me at a relatively short distance were both injured enough to stop engaging me. I now needed to take down the third one. Through the loose, uneven terrain, I pushed off of the ground and rushed towards the cloak. He quickly saw me coming and adjusted the movement of his floating sword to zip towards me. The path was obvious, so I was able to raise my Yuri-Luki-I and block it without much trouble. I had now gained a few precious seconds and closed the distance between the two of us. He was now within my striking distance. His close combat abilities were next to none, so I planted my right foot into the ground and swung my Yuri-Luki-I with all of my strength. In one clean strike, I sliced straight through his body, cutting him down. However, I wouldn't get much time to have a break. I looked around and noticed that all three of my elite minions were still in combat. I wouldn't be able to bring any to me for support at the moment, though. There was a very big issue at hand. I was just catching my breath when I noticed a white cloak dashing towards me. Crap, I'm not ready for a boss battle yet. I raised my Yuri-Luki-I as I braced myself for another round of fighting. He ran straight towards me and kicked me with an extremely powerful right kick. I felt the muscle in my left arm contract in pain as his leg smashed into it. The momentum sent me tumbling to the ground, getting a nice taste of the dirt and blood splattered across the floor. Without any hesitation, he began charging at me again. I needed more power. Mayuri, give me more power. Okay. Suddenly, Mayuri appeared in front of me. Her body was somewhat hollow, as if she were a hologram or a spirit of some sort. However, despite that, her deep purple dress and long hair were clear as day. Time seemed to slow down. I'll be taking some memories. The moment she finished her sentence, she disappeared once again, vanishing into the air. I didn't feel as if my body were any more energetic. However, I noticed a blackish tint bordering the blade of my Yuri-Luki-I. With all the strength left in my body, I pulled myself up from the ground and swung my sword at the white cloak. A blade of black aura was ejected from my blade and sliced through the air straight toward them. The air swirled as the black matter tore through. The strike smashed straight into his body, sending him crashing to the ground. My legs were hurting. My arms were hurting. A few seconds later, he slowly got back and began making his way over to me again. Crap. I recalled Bishop as fast as I could as I began backing up. I stood no chance against this person alone. Even with my Yuri-Luki-I, it seemed that a weapon could only do so much against a combat system. He ran towards me and kicked me in the stomach with a strong left foot. I noticed that he was winding up a punch, so I raised my Yuri-Luki-I to try to block it. His jab connected with the blade with a thump as he also backed up a little. A few moments later, Bishop had arrived, somewhat injured and tired. I needed its help right now if I was going to defeat this cloak. I knew that Bishop has the desperate defense ability, so I hoped that it would be effective against this overwhelming enemy. He had noticed my minion's arrival and appeared to be acting a little more cautious. We stared at each other from a distance for a little while before he charged in for his next attack. His cape fluttered in the air as he dashed towards me with extreme speed. In response, I raised my Yuri-Luki-I and prepared to strike him down. As he got closer to me, I ordered Bishop to stand in front of me. Now that Bishop was in the way, the white cloak was forced to kick it away. In the brief moment of time that was bought, I wound up my Yuri-Luki-I. I concentrated my thoughts and tensed my body as I held my Yuri-Luki-I in front of me. I held onto the grip as hard as I could. Cut them down, my Yuri. A thick aura gathered around the blade. A gigantic shockwave of air was explosively launched from the blade. It blasted directly into the white cloak without any time for them to effectively block my attack. The attack was enough to send them crashing into the ground, spattering dirt, bark and rocks all over the sky. I quickly closed the distance, prepared to strike again. Based on my observations, this person was way too fast and way too strong to be normal. He likely had something along the lines of a martial arts system that boosted his physical capabilities. However, I wouldn't be able to know the specifics. I hoped that, system disable, would be able to weaken him to some extent so that I would be able to finish him off. Even while he was on the ground, he managed to kick me in the shin, causing me to lose my balance. I ordered Bishop to charge at him and try to slice him up. Bishop swung several times, but the white cloak's movements were still extremely smooth and technical. Bishop missed several shots before finally connecting its blade with his body. The cut drew blood, staining the white cloak as he tried to get up from the ground. However, I was already right up next to his face. My Yuri-Luki-I cast a shadow over his face as the blade fell straight down. In one clean strike, the white cloak was killed. I would have liked to ask him some questions. Oh well. I took a few moments to catch my breath. Bishop finished off the rest of the cloaks around me, so my general area was relatively quiet all of a sudden. I still didn't know how well Chloe and Rook were doing. I decided to loot some of the bodies. X74, wood. X30, leaves. X9, meat. X8, rocks. X1, enhancement agent. In the inventory of one of the black cloaks, there was nothing that interesting aside from the enhancement agent. I wasn't sure what it was. I looked at the other two. X9, wood. X31, leaves. X9, meat. X56, rocks. X1, enhancement agent. X54, wood. X2, meat. X8, rocks. X1, enhancement agent. They all seemed to have these enhancement agents. I looked to see if there was a description of what it did, however, I wasn't able to find anything. Hey Mayuri, do you know what these enhancement agents are? I'm not your personal dictionary, don't just ask me random questions. Ouch. It looked like I wasn't going to have any luck with Mayuri either. I decided to loot the body of the white cloak, the supposed leader of the settlement. X9, wood. X31, leaves. X9, meat. X56, rocks. X27, iron. X4, gold. X8, enhancement agents. What seemed interesting was that this person has many more enhancement agents. Originally, I assumed that the white cloak just had a combat system or something that was boosting his physical ability. However, there might be something about these enhancement agents that would explain his increased strength. He certainly had many more than his underlings, so it could explain his increased strength. I looked at the enhancement agents and wondered what I could do with them. If they really increased your physical abilities, then I should be able to equip them somehow as well, right? There didn't appear to be an option to equip them or anything. I guess I'd just hold on to them until I could find out how to use them. I used this time to reorganize my inventory. I would likely be looting quite a few more corpses, so I should make some room. Inventory 8410/9350. 1x Lesser Stone Axe, durability 52%. 1x Enchanted Silver Pickaxe, durability 24%. 43x Iron. 29x Gold. 4x Diamond. 1x Platinum. 7466x Wood. 32x Apples. 500x Leaves. 19x Meat. 310x Rocks. X11 Enhancement Agents. 4x Ultra Hardened Stone. Token balance 43.773. My inventory was starting to get quite full once again. It was beginning to get quite jarring looking at such a large list of items. You have leveled up. Level up. Level 7-level 8. Rewards. Shop level increase. 1-2. More crafting recipes. Inventory folders. Finally, I had a way to organize my inventory so I didn't have to look at so many different things all at once. I also managed to get a shop level increase. I assumed that meant better things in the shop, although I'll check it in a second. I was given the option to sort my inventory into folders, so I created a few. Vegetation/wood, mining, and miscellaneous. Now that I'd organized my inventory, I decided to check out the new shop. Shop Plus refreshes every day. Elite Minion Upgrade Token, 30 tokens. Spear Minion Recipe, 7 tokens. Minion Speed Boost Potion, 1 token. Grand Exchange. It was called Shop Plus now, which was interesting, but the main new feature was the Grand Exchange. I looked at it and checked it out. A Grand Exchange. Top items. 1. X1, wood, cost, 500 tokens, seller, Mackenzie Franklin. 2. X1, enchanted diamond sword, cost 43 tokens, seller, Radine Sedeganad. 3. Not applicable. 4. Not applicable. 5. Not applicable. I guess you needed to be of a significantly high level in order to use the Grand Exchange, so it seemed that for a pretty long time, it's going to be worth no more than some quick comedic relief. Oh well, I decided to begin making my way around the settlement to try to pick off the remaining cloaks. I could hear the sound of swords clashing and metal clanging in the distance, so I made my way in that direction. There were quite a large number of huts in this settlement. It somewhat reminded me of a small village. After strolling around some wooden huts and the various other buildings that this settlement had, I found Chloe, who had just about finished off the cloaks she was fighting. Hey, William, I'm finished over here. Are there any more of them? I think my minions have it covered. Ah, that's good. I walked over to some of the cloaks that she had cut down and looked at their inventories. It seemed that Chloe had already looted them. By the way, do you know what these enhancement agents are? She asked. I think they give a boost to physical abilities, but I don't know how to use them. Ah, I see. She made her way over to me and we began walking around the settlement, checking out all of their buildings. There's not much in here. There wasn't really anything of worth in any of the huts. Even the items that were scattered around the place were all low-tier items that weren't worth picking up. After we searched around for a few minutes, we decided that the place really wasn't worth looting. Despite their strength in numbers, in terms of individual wealth, they were pretty poor. I called some scout minions to the settlement and ordered them to search the place. It was better for my scout minions to act like vacuum cleaners and scavenge up anything that they could sell for tokens. After doing so, I looked up at the sky and noticed that it was already quite dark. The fighting had gone on for longer than I had expected and now we didn't have time to make it back home before the zombies arrived. Looks like we'll be camping here for the night. I wanted to sleep in my bed. I doubt we'll be doing much sleeping tonight. Hey, that's not what I meant. I could recall some of my minions to this new settlement, but I decided that it might be a better idea to leave them at our home settlement as there was a chance that it might get destroyed if we leave it unattended. However, as a result, we would have to survive the night with only the two of us and my elite minions who were somewhat injured. With much less manpower than normal, I had to think of a different strategy for the night. This settlement was quite large, meaning there would be no way to stop the zombies from coming in entirely, so patrolling the border was not an option. The only other option was to allow the zombies to come in and to fight in and around the various huts that they had. It would be like guerrilla warfare except against zombies. I decided to keep Chloe and my elites close by at all times to minimize the amount of space we would take up. Our best plan was to either continuously whittle them down until they eventually die out or to just stall until daytime. There was also a chance that a special zombie might appear, however, that would actually be beneficial for us as it is much easier to fight one decently strong enemy than to fight a horde of weaker zombies. As night came along, I quickly cooked some meat on a fire and we had a very brief dinner. There wasn't really much reinforcement we could do since the huts were so weak that it would hardly make a difference. It was very likely that we weren't going to be getting any sleep tonight. As the area got darker, I lit the biggest fire I could in their central fire pit to provide the entire with light. The huts cast large menacing shadows on their opposite sides, however, aside from that, the fire was enough to illuminate most of the settlement. Eventually, the sound of zombies in the distance became louder and louder. I ordered Knight to start shooting at them, however, I wasn't going to engage them in close quarters combat until they were really starting to pile up and overrun us. It wasn't worth the energy to try to cut them down while they were just around the border. Are we going to wait for them to come to us? That's basically the strategy. Chloe also pulled out her platinum bow and began shooting at the zombies. Her aim had drastically increased since the first time I got her to use a bow. Her growth was scarily fast, she was almost as skilled as Ilrich with the bow. Nearly every single one of her shots hit a zombie in the head, splattering their rotten heads and causing them to tumble to the ground. Hee, how am I with the bow now? You're pretty good. Thanks. With more motivation, she continued to shoot down the zombies, slowly whittling away at their front line. However, with just bows alone, they were eventually going to reach a density where we can't stop them. I still had 2 grenades in my inventory that I collected from the man who was living with us for a little while. They could be used in an emergency, but I wanted to keep them for as long as possible. Such grenades are really valuable in such a place, especially with no modern weapons. After a few minutes, the zombies began closing the distance between us. Alright, let's get a move on. As a group, we began sneaking through the settlement. If possible, I wanted to lure as many zombies as I could into a single and try to cut them down with Mayuri Luki. My arms were already somewhat stiff from the first time I used her power, but I could probably sustain another without suffering too much. We snuck around the side of the huts, carefully observing our surroundings. I ordered Knight to shoot any zombies which were too close for comfort. We managed to move around the camp, luring the zombies behind us. With Rook and Bishop taking care of any zombies which may be lurking in front of us, we were relatively safe for the time being. Suddenly, I was ambushed by a crawling zombie. It immediately jumped up at me, aiming straight for my neck. Its disgusting body and decaying flesh were extremely pungent up close. It moved erratically and lunged straight for me. Reacting quickly, Chloe cut it down with her platinum sword, slicing the zombie in half. The rotten blood splattered all over the ground. I decided to stop around the back of several huts. There were a few paths for zombies to close in, but the relatively narrow paths should make it easier to cull them. The zombies were definitely strong enough to break down the weak, thimble huts if they really wanted to. However, if we didn't actually stay inside them, there was a good chance that they would just try to go around. I stationed Bishop and Rook at a channel each and Chloe and I watched the other few. Knight continued to shoot away at the zombies as they gradually approached. There were a few more crawling zombies which rapidly approached us. Chloe drew her sword and so did I. As the zombies got closer, I raised my manhwarecap and cut them down as quickly as I could. It was still somewhat difficult to hit the unpredictable crawling zombies, however the lightness of the sword meant that I had time to recover even if I missed the first shot. Eventually, we managed to clear the first wave of crawling zombies which bought us some more time. Without them, the battlefield felt a lot less urgent. However, several minutes later, the zombies once again began grouping up and began pushing in at a rate faster than what my elites could handle. Chloe, I'm going to swing, watch out. Okie. As she moved out of the way, I concentrated my thoughts and tensed my body as I held my manhwarecap in front of me. I held onto the grip as hard as I could. Cut them down, manhwa. A thick aura gathered around the blade. I aimed as precisely as I could to try to hit as many zombies as I could. I assumed that it was strong enough to cut them down in a single strike. As the shockwave of air traveled towards them, an entire row of zombies was sent crashing to the ground, taking with them some zombies behind. As a row of zombies tumbled to the ground, I looked at the pack once again. The shockwave was quite powerful, however, it wasn't infinitely strong. After destroying the zombies at the front, the ones behind slowly began making their way through. My arms were seriously hurting now. This is what happens when you overuse my power. I was informed by Mayuri's voice. Suddenly, the remaining zombies stopped in place. They were frozen as if they had suddenly seen something that shocked them. A few moments later, they turned around and began fleeing back into the forest. I knew what was coming. It's going to be a special zombie, I said. We quickly made our way to an open area near the center of the settlement. I looked out into the dark abyss that was the forest, as the area went eerily silent after all that commotion. The intense pressure that I felt in the last fight against a special zombie was back. It felt as if my entire body was being crushed, my senses were being overloaded, and I felt an overwhelming feeling of dread. Out of the forest, a relatively tall but thin zombie showed its horrific head from out of the thick green leaves. There was some sort of greenish-gray liquid dribbling out of its mouth. As it looked around, it managed to catch a glimpse of us and began walking straight toward us. Regurgitation. All of it sudden, a huge amount of regurgitation arose from inside of its mouth. The big pile of liquid was like a projectile, covering the sky above us as it splashed down. Shit. Chloe pulled out her diamond shield and blocked the corrosive liquid which rained on us. However, as she observed her shield, it turns out that the outer layer had been dissolved and it melted off like volcanic lava. The color and structure of the shield had been compromised as it began rotting away from the regurgitation. This isn't good, it's burning through my shield. From the looks of it, if it was corrosive enough to burn through a diamond shield, we were likely going to have to dodge it at all costs. If that liquid hit our bodies, who knows what would happen to our skin. We began running between the huts, taking cover from the acid-like rain which was coming down against us. It seemed that the Zen ability of this zombie was pretty simple. Chloe pulled out her platinum bow and began taking aim at the lanky zombie from afar. It seemed our best strategy was to shoot at it from a distance and avoid its attacks at all costs. I thought about it. I could probably send my elite minions in to engage it in close-quarters combat, although I ran the risk of losing them entirely. Just before, when the first attack of regurgitation hit them, they lost almost a third of their health from it. I didn't want to risk losing one of my elite minions unless it was really dire. Chloe managed to hit a shot at the zombie from a distance. The arrow cut straight into the zombie's flesh, however, it only managed to hit it in the leg. The zombie fell off balance, but it ripped the arrow out of its leg. A few moments later, the wound had healed as if it wasn't even there in the first place. We have to try to hit in the head, stomach or heart, I told Chloe. I know that, it's just really hard, you know. She loaded another arrow onto her bow and aimed it at the zombie. Regurgitation. Suddenly, it threw up again and a wave of acidic liquid flew toward us. Shit. I grabbed Chloe and dived behind a hut. The liquid splashed all over the huts and dissolved its room. It meshed the wood into a dark, viscous liquid. The entire foundations of the hut fell apart and even the walls came crashing down. We rushed behind another hut as we kept an eye on the zombie. Chloe fired another arrow at the zombie. Luckily, the arrow managed to hit the zombie in the stomach. It suddenly stopped and held onto its stomach in pain. However, it still appeared to be alive. A moment later, the zombie pulled the arrow out, spurting some blood on the ground. Not long after, the wound healed itself up and it was as good as new. These zombies had some serious regenerative abilities. It was practically impossible to kill them without hitting their weak spot. Chloe loaded another arrow into her silver bow and aimed it at the zombie again. However, this time, the zombie began running towards us. The long limbs and tall body of the zombie made its run technique look really awkward, however, there was no doubt that it was fast, really fast. We turned and also ran away as fast as possible. At point blank, we'd all be covered in its vomit and we'd have no time to react. We rushed around the huts, trying to put some distance between us. It chased us from behind, awkwardly turning and running as we hid around corners to try to lose it. Chloe quickly turned and fired another arrow, however, the arrow flew past the zombie and missed completely. Crap, it's hard to shoot while moving. We hurried further and further away, we could not afford to have the zombie catch up to us. Regurgitation. The zombie regurgitated again, shooting a dangerous liquid toward us. We were forced to dive around the corner as we had hardly any time to avoid its attack. In the acid, 2 of my elite minions ended up being hit and lost a huge portion of their health. This isn't good. Chloe, can you shoot again? I'll have to stop to be able to fire an accurate shot. I'll try to distract it with Bishop. I sent Bishop toward the zombie as Chloe took aim. It was risky since Bishop was low on health, however, at this rate, we'd all die. With Bishop's desperate defense ability, I hoped that it would be able to distract it for a decent amount of time. Chloe's arrow flew through the air. It landed on the zombie's neck. Crap, I missed. Regurgitation. The zombie went through another acid reflux, gathering toxic vomit in its rotten mouth before spewing it toward us. With each strike, the zombie was closing the distance on us. We were forced to dash behind cover again in order to avoid the strike. A huge splash of toxic liquid frantically dissolved the feeble wooden hut we were hiding behind. Our possible covers were slowly getting worn down. Several of the huts were already destroyed and the remaining ones are quite spread out so it wouldn't be easy to move between them. Chloe pulled out another arrow and placed it on her platinum bow. She peeked around the corner of the melting wooden hut and fired another arrow straight toward the zombie. This time, the arrow stabbed directly into the center of its chest. The arrow sunk into its heart chamber and it fell to the ground in agony. I got Knight to take aim at it and Chloe loaded another arrow just in case. The zombie squealed on the ground as we prepared our next attacks. Suddenly, even though the zombie appeared to be in pain, it raised its head at us. Noticing what was happening, we quickly ran away as it gathered vomit in its throat. We just barely managed to make it behind another hut before it regurgitated again, shooting a rain of acidic liquid. It quickly dissolved the hut we hid behind, turning the wood into a viscous black sticky mush. With her arrow already loaded, Chloe aimed her bow at the zombie and fired again. However, the arrow hit the zombie on the arm, only causing it a slight inconvenience. Knight also fired at the zombie but the arrows were too weak to deal any significant damage. The zombie tossed and turned a little bit before pulling out the arrows which were lodged in it. As fast as she could, Chloe placed another arrow on her bow. Its weak spot is its head, I informed her. Alright, let's hope this one hits. The arrow zipped through the air, traveling like an aeroplane, it flew straight toward the zombie as it did nothing but look. It managed to lodge itself into its head. The zombie fell to the ground as its entire body began disintegrating. Its already rotten flesh began evaporating, like water from a kettle, rising into the sky. The zombie squealed and screamed but it was slowly vanishing into nothingness. As the zombie died, I took a moment to catch my breath. Thank goodness, we should be safe for tonight. Yeah, let's hope. All of my elite minions were quite injured but Bishop was especially low on health. Level 20, Warrior Minion, 1. Experience, 87 out of 200. Health, 7%. Stamina, 22%. Actions. Scout. Hunt. Fight. I looked around the camp to try to find a suitable place to stay the night. After the special zombie, there was only a very small dribble of zombies left around the border of the forest. We would finally have a break from the fighting and get to sleep for the night. There were still a few huts that weren't yet destroyed so I set my elites on standby and decided to get some sleep for the next day. Asterisk. I was awoken by the sound of someone knocking on my door. It's midday. It was Chloe's voice. I slowly pulled myself out of bed as I stretched my sore body. I'm coming. I slowly made my way toward the unfamiliar door and pulled it open. I was greeted by a happy, smiling Chloe. Why are you so happy? I asked. No reason. Whatever. We should start making our way home, I said. Aren't we going to try to find their main settlement? I need some time to recover and gather my forces. Judging by today, I'm going to need almost all of my minions if we are going to fight their main army. Ah, I guess so. Suddenly, we heard a sound coming from the forest. At this hour? Was it more cloaks? A man walked out from the forest. He was dressed quite formally, like a merchant or something. We made our way over cautiously and greeted him. Hello there, before you attack me, let me explain why I'm here. He looked around and seemed surprised by the lack of people. Wait, where is everyone? He asked. Everyone? I assumed that he was referring to the cloaks that we had slaughtered. Yeah, usually there are a lot more people in this settlement. I drew my eye. He suddenly jolted in fear. What do you want? I asked. Wait. I'm a merchant, I have a merchant system that lets me trade with other people, he said frantically in a weak tone. A merchant? Suddenly, a notification came up. Would you like to initiate a trade? Okay. Trading. X1, Light Sphere, 4 tokens. X1, Fishing Rod, 2 tokens. X1, Enchantment Stone, 20 tokens. Is this all you have to offer? I asked. Yes, my shop only refreshed once per day and once I'm sold out that's it for the day. I looked at the items. Alright, I'll buy all of them. All of them? Are you sure? I'm sure. Suddenly, I received another notification. Trade. +1, Light Sphere. +1, Fishing Rod. +1, Enchantment Stone. -26, tokens. The items were automatically transferred into my inventory. I had quite a large number of tokens to spare from all the gatherings that my minions had been doing, especially from my various minor minions. These were all relatively novel items, so I wanted to see what they did. Considering I haven't seen them in the crafting menu, I assumed that they'd be quite hard to get normally. Alright, you said your shop refreshed once a day? Yes. What type of items do you usually sell? Well, it depends, as my system levels up the types of items I can sell and the quantity increase. Every time I sell to a new customer, I gain some products related to their system. I see, come over to our settlement once a day so I can see what you have to offer. But some Tim Dash. I drew my eye. I have a system that could track you down whenever I want. I assume you don't want any trouble, so come over to our settlement once a day. Oh okay, is this not your settlement? No, we recently just killed everyone here. The trader looked up at me. So what's your name? I asked. It's Eugene Pariston, others call me Gene. Okay, Gene, I drew on one of the maps I held and marked out the settlement that Chloe had overtaken a few days ago. I didn't want to give him to the location of our settlement just in case he decided to try to bring an army. The other settlement was relatively close to our main camp anyways, and I'd like to make it into a secondary village for us. Did you get that? I asked. Yeah, so I'll go there every morning? Yes, wait there until we arrive. Oh okay. He was still looking at my sword. I withdrew my eye and placed it back into its sheath. Alright, we'll be going now, I announced. Chloe made her way over to me and the two of us walked up the small hill back into the forest. The trader seemed to be somewhat in shock, but not long after, he began walking back the way he came as well. As we trekked through the rough forest terrain, I opened my inventory and had a look at the items I bought. Inventory, miscellaneous. X1, Light Sphere. X1, Fishing Rod. X1, Enchantment Stone. First of all, I took out the Light Sphere. In my hand, I held a large fluorescent ball. It was extremely bright, lighting up the entire area just on its own. I looked around at the dark shadows being cast by the trees as the bright light illuminated the place. Ah, that's bright. I guess it was just a permanent light source. It was a bit large and awkward. Whilst it was definitely quite bright, it wasn't going to be all that useful as something aside from being a piece of furniture. Being able to light up my hut at night might be somewhat helpful if I needed to do something, and it just looked pretty cool anyways. I returned the large ball back into my inventory and took out the fishing rod. As I held the fishing rod in my hand, I observed it, and for the most part, it just looked like a normal fishing rod. I had never gone fishing before, so I had no idea how to actually use one and what the different parts of a fishing rod are for. There wasn't a fishing rod crafting recipe in the crafting menu, so I didn't know if I just wouldn't unlock it until later or if I just didn't have a fishing rod recipe entirely. I didn't have any bait or anything, so it was basically useless. I wanted to have it just in case it could be of use in the future if I ever come across some bait or find someone who knows how to fish. Chloe, do you know how to fish? Oh me? I fished a few times when I was little, but aside from that I haven't. Alright. I returned the fishing rod to my inventory and looked at the final item. I observed the enchantment stone, which had a line of text next to it. Use this to increase the number of enchantment slots of a piece of equipment by 1. After reading the description, I wondered if I could put it on my eye. I summoned it and tried jamming it in my sword. It hit the blade with a thump and had no effect. I guess it doesn't work. I'd hold on to it for now until I got a better weapon or tool to put it on. It would be a waste to put it on my silver pickaxe or any of my other equipment. While I was thinking about that, I decided to look through my crafting menu to see if there was anything else useful that I could craft. After a few more minutes, we finally arrived back at our camp. It was practically empty since my minions were automatically sent on expeditions. As I walked out of the forest towards the settlement, I was approached by my minion manager. "I've got the end-of-day report." End-of-day report. Total resources gathered. X2114, wood. X20, leaves. X22, meat. X418, rocks. X29, ultra-hardened stone. X13, iron. X3, gold. Other. X53, scout minions crafted. X8, minion huts built. My army was growing at a rapid rate. I had several hundred scout minions and there was nowhere near enough space in the settlement to hold them all. My camp had expanded significantly since I began, but the area was already getting congested again. I recalled a few woodcutter minions and ordered them to start cutting down the trees around the camp. I wanted to increase my border and increase the amount of space I had to build more buildings. I had a very large number of minion huts already, but my rate of minion production was faster than the hut building rate. Chloe made her way to an empty spot and began using her system to gather resources. I looked in my crafting menu and decided to craft some more builder minions. I had a quick look at the housing tab. Minion housing. When there is housing available, minions will spawn at the rate dependent on the number of empty houses available and the housing rank. Current housing rank, F+. Current housing available, 236. Yeah, I really needed more huts. With the plentiful resources that I had, I built as many builder minions as I could. After that, I coded all of them to build minion huts whenever possible. I had also moved the priority onto building an army over increasing my resource gathering. I wrote a line of code for my minion manager who was in control of assigning the new scout minion something to learn. On. Let scout minion learn. Resource gathering, 30%. Combat, 65%. Utility, 5%. This was the best distribution I could think of. I wanted to expand my forces before I took on the main army of the cloaks, which I assumed was still a decent distance away. Based on what the man said, they apparently had someone who used to be in the top 5 ranks, which meant they were likely incredibly powerful. In terms of physical strength, I wasn't really on a level to compete with someone who has a combat system. I wanted to increase my personal combat ability, but I figured that my minions would have to do most of the fighting. I decided to have a quick look at the global rankings. Global rankings. New Gen Humans. 1. Mackenzie Franklin, 2309. 2. Noah Gate, 1749. 3. Oliver Moran, 1498. 4. Maya Keller, 1232. 5. Radine Sedeganad, 1227. Your rank, number 19. Your estimated progression score, 921. I was slowly climbing up the rankings, however the people near the top were progressing at an unprecedented rate. The gap between me and the top rankers was only growing. If I wanted to catch up, I would have to further optimize my strategy. I had a look at my minion setup and thought about what I could do. Advanced System Controls. Resource Division, 152 minions. 3x Woodcutter Minion. 11x Miner Minion. 52x Scout Minion, Mining. 25x Scout Minion, Woodcutting. 36x Scout Minion, Resource Gathering. 6x Scout Minion, Hunting. 1x Scout Minion, Farming. 18x Basic Scout Minion. Combat Division, 135 minions. 1x Advanced Warrior Minion. 1x Warrior Minion. 60x Scout Minions, Swordplay. 42x Scout Minions, Archery. 12x Scout Minion, Combat. 19x Basic Scout Minion. Utility Division, 26 minions. 13x Builder Minion. 10x Scout Minion, Utility. 2x Basic Scout Minion. 1x Minion Manager. My army was quite beautifully large. Even so, I worried about how well I would be able to fight someone who was in the top 5 ranks at one point. Just judging by the current progression of the top 5, they seemed to be extremely capable of improving. I had a pretty resource-gathering based system, and I doubted that there were many people with systems which had better resource collecting abilities than mine. Even something like Chloe's system would be pretty slow on its own, due to the lack of variety in what she collected. I could change my system and program it to collect anything I want at a certain time. I was definitely running out of space in my original settlement. I thought about it for a little, but I decided to try to populate the settlements that we took over with my minions. It was easier than trying to constantly expand my one camp, which was starting to get more and more difficult due to terrain issues. I sent 50 Sword Scout minions over to the camp closest to ours. I took out my map and labeled it as Camp B since the main camp was Camp A. While I was there, I labeled the other camp we just took over Camp C and quickly scribbled down how many minions I was going to send to each. I was going to need to travel to Camp B once a day anyways just to trade with the wandering trader. There was quite a lot of space over there, so I would be able to build quite a few more minion huts in order to improve my minion housing. Now that that was in order, I decided to look through my crafting menu to see if there was something nice I could craft. I scrolled through, looking at armor and weapons, until I finally found something that caught my eye. It was a crafting recipe for something called a power flux. When activated, increase the combat ability of all minions by 40%, it has a 5-minute cooldown. The crafting recipe required 1 standard flux and 5 hardened iron. The recipe for a standard flux was 50 iron, 10 gold, and 2 diamonds. I had a quick look in my inventory. Inventory, mining. 62x iron. 33x gold. 4x diamond. 2x platinum. 876x rocks. 7x ultra-hardened stone. I already had enough resources to craft a standard flux. After doing so, it appeared in my inventory with a short description. When activated, increase the speed of all minions by 20%, it has a 4-minute cooldown. It had an ability on its own, although the power flux was still significantly better. The standard flux was a physical object, a small glowing cube, but you could activate the ability without needing to take it out of your inventory. Considering that I could craft more than one, it was completely possible craft multiple and use them as the others were cooling down. I didn't have enough resources to make all of that though. I decided to change some code on my minions to make them focus on gathering iron. After doing so, I looked through my crafting menu again and searched for something else to craft. I still had the enchantment stone that I wanted to use. I then noticed an axe which looked somewhat interesting. It was called a fine logger's axe. 10% of the wood gathered by using this axe will be turned into coal. 1% of the wood gathered using this axe will be turned into diamond. It wasn't too amazing of an ability, but it might be useful to be able to gather coal without the need to go down to the mines. It would also turn some wood into diamond, which could be useful in the future. Even if I didn't have anything I especially needed to craft, I would still be able to sell the diamonds for a decent amount of tokens. The crafting recipe required 5,000 wood, 5 ultra-hardened stone and a diamond. I actually already had Alte resources needed to craft it. It would be drying out my very large excess of wood from not using it in a while. I quickly crafted the axe and it appeared in my hand. It was extremely sturdy, with a rich, hard wooden handle and an incredibly strong blade. It was much heavier than the other axes I used, but it wasn't too much of an issue as the greater weight made it easier to use the momentum to cut down a tree. With that, I decided to open the enchanting menu and add some enchantments to it. Enchanting menu. Fine logger's axe. Available enchantment slots, 2. Enchanting cost, 10 tokens. There was a higher enchanting cost for this axe than my silver pickaxe, but it was to be expected. I had quite a large excess of tokens, so it didn't really make a difference. My resource gathering minions had been selling resources for tokens for quite a few days. With that in mind, I added the first enchantment to my fine logger's axe.
Thank you so much. Visit us more for more novels, please. Like, subscribe,